Alright guys, today we're going to be making some chocolate chip cookies. I really love making chocolate chip cookies. Beyond just being super simple, people are always really impressed with them, and they are really great when you need to apologize or grease the wheels a little bit. I've given them to girls and got dates from it. There's a lot you can do with a chocolate chip cookie. So I'm just going to go over everything. We have some AP flour, it's all-purpose flour. Some white sugar, just regular white sugar, chocolate chips, the most important part, some baking powder, not to be confused with baking soda. Difference is baking powder has an acid already added to it, so that the baking soda has something to react with. Baking soda, when you're cooking with it, you need to make sure that whatever you add it to has an acid in it, otherwise it doesn't have its effervescent action, and it doesn't do anything. Yeah, so if you're cooking and making something that doesn't have any additional acid in it, you need to use baking powder, which has both. It's basically baking soda plus cream of tartar, which is an acid. That's all it is. We have brown sugar, some large eggs, some Tahitian vanilla extract, some cooking spray, some different pieces of tools, and of course my mixer, the most important part. Today I'll be using the paddle attachment. So as you can see, I got everything here. We're starting from scratch. First thing we're going to do is open up the butter. This is 1 full pound of butter, 4 sticks if you're cooking at home. Now this is a big recipe for most people, although this is just kind of standard for me. It'll make about 40-45 cookies depending on how big you make them, which is never enough. So we're just going to cut it up real quick. Some people like to have your butter at room temperature, but it's not necessary. We're going to physically make it do what we want. So I'm just going to add all the butter in, pop it up in the mixer, pop in our paddle, and we're just going to go at a low speed. At first just slow because it is still kind of firm, so that butter's going to, if you just turn it on high, that butter's going to literally pop up and fly out. And what I want to do is something called the cream method. Basically, I'm going to be adding my sugar to the butter, and that'll be the base on which I work. Basically, the name of the game when it comes to the creaming method is incorporating air. We're going to basically be adding air into this butter, and it's going to become light and fluffy. And that air is important in the texture of the cookie's final product. So now we're going to get the sugar ready. Put away these big containers after we're done. I'm going to do about 1½ cups of white sugar. And again, I'm just going to eyeball this, kind of like what we were talking about last week. It doesn't have to be perfect. I want to show that you can just do this. Yeah, so if you just got a little half, you know. It doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to get bent out of shape about being able to get exact about it. It's very, very easy. We got some brown sugar. This is just some golden brown sugar. Again, I'm just going to put about 1½ cups. When you're using brown sugar, you want to load it up and then kind of pack it down a little bit into the cup, because little air gaps will form and you won't get a consistent measure. Again, I'm just going to go half. Okay. Now I'm going to just kind of mix this up a little bit. Now we can see, I just want to bring this over and show you guys, the butter has gotten a lighter color to it. See how it's lighter than when we started? Yeah. That's because we've incorporated the air. And the more air we incorporate, the more opaque it will become. Kind of like taffy, starts off as a real dark color, and then as it gets on the taffy puller, air is incorporated and it becomes a pastel color. Same principle. You can see I got some butter stuck on the paddle right there, so I'm just gonna knock that off. Scrape the sides a little bit. We're gonna go back to it. Right, now it's time to incorporate the sugar. And again, it's real important that we use real sugar or a sugar substitute. If you're going to use a sugar substitute, it needs to be specifically for baking. Splenda makes a specific baking thing, and that's because the shape of the sugar crystals are abrasive, and that abrasion actually helps to incorporate the air. So if you just added straight Splenda into this, if you wanted to make like a sugar-free cookie, you would end up starting with the texture completely wrong and different because it didn't incorporate air the way it is. There's also, I do basically a half and half mixture. So it's 1.5 cups of white sugar, 1.5 cups of brown sugar. And different people have different proportions of those things. There's a great guide I'm gonna get for you guys when we're all done that basically shows the differences in a cookie when you make little changes to it. So if you want a cookie to be thinner, what you would have to do for that. I'll show you guys that afterwards. So my butter, nice and creamy. I'm going to start adding the sugar in. Gonna get the sides a little scraped. For these mixers, you can get, there's some new paddles that you can get that have built-in little scrapers. They're great. I just don't happen to have one that fits this mixer at the moment. Okay, I'm gonna bring this over to you guys again. Show you texture what we got now. You can see it's just butter and sugar, and it's light and airy and fluffy, and you can see it's soft and it's ready for the next stage. Next stage, eggs. For this recipe we're going to use 4 large eggs. Now, at home, it may be a wise idea to crack the egg into a bowl and then pour the egg into the mixer, because if you drop the shell into the batter, you will never get it out. It instantly gets crushed and it's gone. So I'm just going to be really careful. And we want to add 1 egg at a time. We want to incorporate it really slowly. When you watch it, you can see at the bottom it starts out being real liquidy, and I'm just going to give it a second before adding a little bit more. When cracking eggs, I always like to crack on a flat surface, on the countertop versus on the side. When you crack on something sharp or on a corner, it tends to push pieces of the shell inside the egg. And actually, most of the Borrelia bacteria comes from the exterior of the shell. You get the chances of salmonella from the exterior of the shell. So to minimize both cross-contamination and actual physical contamination of the shell being in the egg, I just like to go on a flat surface. You can see it cracks it, but doesn't push it in. Wash my hands. So next up is the vanilla. Now being here, vanilla can be a little controversial. This does have alcohol in it, alright? If that's a problem for anyone as an individual, there are alcohol-free extracts, but the alcohol ones are the best. They are. They taste the best. Now, can we taste any alcohol in the finished product? Absolutely not. So it's something you have to take with a grain of salt. It's one of the only alcoholic things I have in this kitchen. So I like to use just like about a tablespoon or so. But if you like vanilla, then add a little bit more. Add 2 tablespoons. It's not a big deal. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. So now all of our wet ingredients are now ready to go. I'm going to get all of my dry ingredients ready now. So, go to my all-purpose flour. Now there is a big difference between flours out there. Everyone knows all-purpose is kind of the most common. It has a medium level of protein, which means when it's cooked, it's going to be medium in firmness when you like pull it apart. The difference between bread flour, AP flour, and cake flour is all protein level. A cake flour, which is something you want a cake to be very tender, right? Your fork will go right through it. So that has a low protein content. That means there's less gluten and there's less of those chains that hold everything together. So it's going to be softer. A bread flour has a high protein level and it makes it so that it's firm. I mean, you can never put a fork through a piece of bread, right? And that is the big difference. So this is kind of middle of the road AP flour, which is perfectly fine for cookies. I'm not going to sift this flour. Again, I want to show you guys that with minimal effort, it still is fine. You don't have to worry about it. I do like to mix the flour up so that it's not really like packed in there. And I'm going to do 4.5 cups. Now, to my flour, I'm going to add my baking powder. I'm going to do about 1 full tablespoon of baking powder because I like my cookies to be really light. Baking powder is a leavener. That means while it's cooking, there's a chemical process that's going to create air. And that air is going to make it rise. It's double acting, which means that it's activated by the acid, like I discussed already. It's also activated by heat. So when it goes in the oven, it will continue to leaven. But because as soon as you add liquid to it, it will start bubbling. As we all know, we've added the baking soda. So you want to do this process, you don't want to mix it too early before you bake it up. I'm also going to add about half a tablespoon of salt. Salt isn't necessarily something that you're going to taste outright, but it does affect, on a chemical level, it affects the texture of the cookie, or any bread products in fact. They all have salt in them on some level, and if you didn't have the salt in it, you would instantly know it. So I'm just going to incorporate all this so that it's evenly mixed. And my wet's already ready to go, so we're just going to start adding it in. I'll go ahead and get the sides a little straight. important part, the chocolate. One of my trademark features of cookies, of my chocolate chip cookies, is I always have more chocolate than flour. That's key. However many batches, whatever you're doing, whatever it is, I had 4.5 cups of flour. So I'm going to start with at least 5 cups of chocolate.
Like your thing.
And in addition to that, these are the little mini chocolate chips, which actually fit more in any given volume. So this is actually even adding even more chocolate in comparison to a standard chocolate chip. So I'm feeling chocolatey today, so let's go 6. I would love to add the rest of that, but that'd be a little too much. You can maybe go 1/2 more. It'll be all right. So we have our chocolate. Let me just show you this finished product. You can see it's creamy, it's got that cookie texture, it's thick, it's ready to go. Now I'm going to take this opportunity, I'm going to just pause that for a second. Before I start that, I made a batch earlier because one of the most important parts of my cookie making process is the resting and cooling process. I never make a cookie, make the batter, put it on the tray, and then cook it. It will never come out right. Problem is,